power to kick it over to Drake, our chief of DAO, chief cook, bottle washer, do it all, everyman, superhuman, to talk about what we've got in terms of programs coming up. And then I'll touch on the mentors workshop and probably tag Andrew in for that. And then we'll hand it over to Cat Jam, and then we'll do some Playgrounds demo. So Drake, all you.
Awesome. Yeah, so glad to see everyone here. Quick run through on what we've got going on for analytics programs right now. We do have Convex challenges live, so you can check the announcements channel for that link. And we'll be doing 3 rounds of Convex questions, experimenting with a different method here to try to introduce some easier questions and then move into more difficult ones. And the hypothesis there is that that will give the analysts a chance to familiarize themselves with the data before some of the more intense questions come up. Also excited to announce that we are approved with Uniswap for a grant, so we'll be doing around analytics or kind of ongoing analytics programs around Uniswap coming soon. And Harmony data, so our curation team has been doing some awesome stuff with Harmony data, so that's available on GitHub if anyone wants to jump in and contribute to that project. I think a big shout out to Shushin and Ant for really being the leads on that, and then shout outs to Forg and Master Chief for really stepping up, as well as Binya. That team has gotten that data ready to go, so we're exploring different ways to get it out into the hands of analysts. So one of those ways will be to expose it through Flipside's query interface. And if there's anyone who's looking for more of a technical way to interface with that data, we can give permissions in Snowflake, so feel free to reach out. That team will be moving on to near data curation next, and there's a call this evening at 6:30 Eastern in Build in Public if anyone's interested to get started with that curation team. And I believe that's all from me, GJ.
Awesome. I'll go super quickly as well. A couple community things. First, we've got an onboarding bot coming our way to help newcomers orient themselves more quickly and in a more automated fashion. We'll still continue to apply the personal touch wherever we can, but having an automated flow should make that a lot easier. And we are also experimenting with reaction roles to let people self-select into some of our community roles based on their skill set. So there'll be some more written communication about what that looks like. But the bottom line is we're doing our best to continue to open doors and be more transparent, push some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes out into the open, and continue on the path toward full decentralization. And then we've got something I personally am super excited about, Mentors Workshop number 2. Andrew, you mind giving us a really quick overview? I think Forg is here as well. So if you want to chime in with anything there, that would be great.
Of course. So yeah, Forg is leading our workshop number 2 tomorrow, which is going to be on Flipside. And we went over the workshop yesterday, and it's really beginner friendly. So if you haven't done any analytics on Flipside data or crypto data, please come in. You can go straight up to the workshop channel, and all the details are pinned on the pinned message. So I think that's all I have. Forg, you want to talk more about it?
No, I mean, I think you did a pretty good job giving a brief overview. Don't necessarily need to share all too much about it because it is going on tomorrow. But yeah, basically going through kind of a ground up approach to using Flipside. Going to be using Terra anchor data specifically, kind of going through exploring those, how to select data, putting together queries and tables. Hope to see you all there.
Awesome. Cat Jam, let me hand it over to you.
All right, thanks so much. I am going to attempt to share my screen to talk about contributor rewards at MetricsDAO. A quick intro. So first, hi, my name is Cat Jam on Discord and the forums. I go by Meg, IRL, and work at Flipside full-time. As the DAO grows, which first of all is super exciting, we've been seeing more and more activities and outputs from the DAO. We want to make sure that we are organized around recognizing and compensating the value that everyone is contributing to the DAO. And so we are rolling out kind of a monthly contributions and reward system that will allow every contributor to self-report their work for the month. And at the end of the month, each pod leader will review the contributions and assess the rewards that are given. This is pretty standard practice across many DAOs if you've contributed in the past. And so we're excited to roll it out here too. The next question on your mind might be, oh, you say that you're rolling out compensation and rewards. What are those compensation and rewards? We are still working on building a treasury through the grants that we've mentioned with Harmony, Near, and the Uniswap program, and hope to monetarily compensate people as soon as possible. In the meantime, we are recognizing those contributions with different levels of POAPs. Make sense so far?
Sounds good. Thanks, Meg.
All right. Thanks, Drake. All right. I'm attempting to share my screen. And it's giving me an error message. Sunslinger, any chance that I could give you the link to present so that we can review the actual spreadsheet?
Meg, you can send that to me.
Okay, I'll do that. That should be in your DMs whenever you get the chance. Awesome, thank you so much. So as you all can see, the sheet is pretty straightforward. We will identify contributors by their Discord handle for now, so make sure that you use the Discord handle that you consistently use to participate in conversations and contribute. The contribution will be a quick description of the work. There's a column to make sure that you've discussed that contribution with your pod lead as a gentle reminder. We want to make sure that pod leads have a good view into all of the different work that people are doing. A link to that work, if applicable, time contributed, hours. This isn't like an hourly pay agreement, but sometimes it's a useful input to how much effort went into the work. And then a functional area, which is a drop down for the specific pod that the work was for. So all very straightforward, organized not around hours and activities, but around outputs and outcomes for the DAO, which we hope will lead towards a super productive working structure. I will send a copy of this out into the general channel and pin it. We'll also follow up at the end of the month when we're actually compiling all of these and doing the reports. But wanted to make sure everyone has a heads up for now. Any questions? My DMs are open and happy to chat.
Awesome. We'll wait a minute for questions, and then based on that, we'll keep rolling with our demo. All right, cool. So to talk about Python, on-chain analytics, Subgrounds, and all topics related, I'm going to turn it over to Tachikoma for the demo. And that stream is live, so let's get right into it. Tachi, it's all you.
Hello, thank you. Hello everyone from MetricsDAO. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and kind of demonstrate some of the work we've been doing and explore opportunities for kind of building more analytics tools with you and progressing the evolution of Web3 and data science in the space. So just a quick overview, we are Playgrounds. And from a top level, we are a community of engineers that are providing interactive education hubs, yield simulation environments, and of course, analytics tools. We started out for the Olympus and Klima ecosystems, but our grand vision is to provide these tools for the greater DeFi and Web3 landscape. So our birthplace, our home is both in the Olympus and Klima DAO. We are all contributors from both DAOs. Most of us are actually belong to both DAOs. And originally, Playground started as a simulation environment built to help people understand the complex protocol mechanics, the staking and bonding mechanisms of these DAOs, and how rebasing works. But over time, we realized that there was a lot more learning and on-chain data that could provide impactful education opportunities for members of that DAO. So we, by fate, we met with Protean Labs, and our visions were so tightly interwoven. Partnership was kind of inevitable, and so together we all, scientists and designers, along with educators, building up the playgrounds that we're going to demonstrate to you today. But before that, I just kind of wanted to give you a journey on the problem that we're trying to solve, and just so you get an understanding, at least from the top level, on how we're approaching these problems and solving them. So again, like I said, there's a great chasm between the natives of DeFi and Web3 and non-natives, and we're just trying to bridge that gap that exists. Starting with Olympus and Klima, the mechanics are dense, so we're trying to simplify that so people understand, and of course, simplify the onboarding process by providing education opportunities. And of course, as with anything, there's so many choices in Web3 and DeFi, and we're trying to create a unifying source of truth using the tools that we create. Our solution to that, again, can be broken into 4 distinct subsystems. The first is to break down these complex mechanics, provide simulation environments to practice what you've learned, and of course reward your curiosity with POAPs and NFTs, or call them proof of competencies, and then provide advanced tool sets for on-chain data analytics. So you can see there's also some tight connection between what we're doing and what MetricsDAO is doing as well. So it's amazing that there's this collision course between both projects and our vision, and really happy to be working with you. Our journey so far is, for this year, is to building phases. Last year we deployed Olympus Playgrounds to kind of get the vision started, the prototype. We'll be deploying Klima Playgrounds very soon. It's currently in the DAO review phase, and of course Playgrounds V2 and Playgrounds Analytics V3 right afterwards. Playgrounds is broken into 3 distinct subsystems. The Learning Hub, which is like a library that has the explainers, the guides, classrooms, which is the NFT reward system, and of course the simulation environments, which is where you get to practice what you've learned and jump into advanced yield management, and of course the Playgrounds Analytics, which is the core of what we'll be discussing today. Playgrounds Analytics is a brainchild of Playgrounds and Protean Labs. And a quick overview, jumping right in, is basically we're providing an on-chain analytics service, which is just a subcomponent of Playgrounds itself. And we're doing this by leveraging our expertise in data engineering, science, and analytics to provide this Python native on-chain transformation tool called Subgrounds to create beautiful dashboards that you see here. From a top level perspective, the infrastructure might be a little complex, but it's quite easy once you look at it in this mapping. Everything relies on the graph, right? So the graph is, if you're not familiar, the graph is a decentralized protocol that's used for indexing and querying data on the blockchain, starting with Ethereum. And it makes it possible to query that data directly. But of course, the graph also allows you to index data from Polygon, Arbitrum, Custom, Polkadot. About 24 networks exist right now that you can gain access to using the graph. Subgrounds is the engine that we built that allows you to interact with the APIs on the graph and convert that into Python and get the data that you need. It also allows you to perform advanced transformations, and of course we have the built-in wrappers for data visualization in Subgrounds as well, while Playgrounds Analytics is built on top of Subgrounds that allows for the optimization of that query data, creation of dynamic dashboards, reports. Basically, we're leveraging the capabilities of Subgrounds to allow you to generate stories, insights, and knowledge dissemination. Again, so the TLDR of Subgrounds really is, something that enables manipulation of the data to reflect your domain expertise. It's highly extensible, it's modular, and it provides the continuity of the existing data analytics tools that you might already be used to. It's minimally verbose, and it reduces the on-chain analytics learning curve that we've come to observe in this space. Again, it's all entirely built on subgraphs. So if you're already familiar with subgraphs, you kind of already halfway through. The only end is you just have to have some understanding of Python to get up and running. And of course, to make life easy for everyone, we have built-in wrappers for data visualization. If you're familiar with Plotly, Plotly is a very popular visualization tool used in the Python community for data analysis. And all of that is all wrapped into a nice package that you can download on your system, or your local system, and start using Subgrounds immediately. So that's a good overview. Now let's jump into the main point of today's demonstration, which is Subgrounds. And to kind of guide, what we're talking about today, I just want to quickly give a TLDR on the graph. Like I said, it's a decentralized protocol for indexing data. And what exactly does that mean? Like today, blockchain properties are like finality. There's a lot of reorganization. There's a lot of complicated interactions and activities going on chain. And it makes it really hard for you to parse through all of that and get the data or the information you really need that's locked on chain. So the graph simplifies that process by by providing an indexing of the entire chain, makes it easy to search and create queries and tables from the data that you're interested in or within any protocol. So for instance, you can imagine a complex smart contracts like Uniswap or even Olympus or Klima. There's a lot of interaction and interoperability between different smart contracts, making it really hard to understand what's going on. But with the graph and the indexing capabilities, it allows you to parse through all of that really easily and pull out queries by a single API, a GraphQL API. So the TLDR of that is, you write a subgraph, which is analogous to, the ETL is extract, transform, and load. You deploy that subgraph to the graph node that processes your deployment, and then you can query using GraphQL API to get the data or the information you need. So a subgraph, basically, it's kind of how the graph learns what and how to index the Ethereum data that's based on your definition or your description. In the formal term for it is a subgraph manifest. And really, a subgraph is just a description that defines the smart contract that you're interested in and the events in that smart contract, the calls and everything that's going on. And the subgraph is how you define all of that, so you can query it pretty easily. And you can do that using handlers, which are just arbitrary codes that are executed whenever something is triggered. The handlers allow you to modify entities. Entities are like fields. Create new entities, delete entities. You can instantiate data sources. That's just basically what the handlers on the subgraph allows you to do. On the node end, basically it were to describe this image, it's like a decentralized application that adds data to Ethereum through a transaction on a smart contract. And then that smart contract emits one or more of those events while processing the transactions. And then the graph node scans the blockchain, the Ethereum block, for new blocks on data and makes the required updates. The graph node then finds the Ethereum event on the subgraph in this blocks and then runs a mapping handler that you've provided. And then, of course, the decentralized application then queries that node for data index on the blockchain using the GraphQL endpoints. And the graph node and then in turn then translate the GraphQL queries into queries for the online data stored for you to fetch that data. So that's just jargon for saying the nodes basically helps you add data to the blockchain, remove data to the blockchain, and reads all of your queries. So as far as the node goes, there are multiple ways to access the node, either through the Graphs hosted service, which is free. And again, you can index from over 24 different networks. And there's a decentralized service available, which is decentralized as well. Of course, there's the self-hosted node, which is something you can do on your own. And this is where Subgrounds comes in. So we looked at the system that the graph has and said, not many people might be familiar with GraphQL. Not many people might be comfortable with learning a new language or a new way to interact with the database or the data stored on-chain using GraphQL or the endpoints. So why don't we, create a tool that uses a more popular language in the data science community, which is Python? But really, it's just a wrapper on top of the GraphQL that allows you to make typeset queries. You can have automatic JSON for data forming into pandas data frames. You can create synthetic fields. And of course, the really fun part of it is while you're making your queries, you can instantiate visualizations on the fly as well using Plot. So all of this has been shown in a demonstration, but just to kind of highlight some of the really cool parts of Subgrounds is makes loading your subgraphs really easy. So it parses through the schema, which is the manifest, as you can see on the right image here of your subgraphs, and generate classes that match the entities of your schema and your fields and the arguments in a Pythonic way. So as you can see in an image here, we load up the Subgrounds library, we import it, and then we call the API, which is what's connecting us to the graph, and then we just write a simple script for the query. It's all type-safe query, allows typeset queries as well, which means that there's no need for a round trip only to find out that you're having error. For instance, if you want to query like protocol metrics and you accidentally type potato metrics, then it checks all of that for you. You can also format into data frames, so you convert your queries from the dictionaries that are usually provided from the graph output into readable data frames or pandas data frames that you can either export into any other tool that you like, or if you're a Python native, you already know what to do with a Python data with a pandas data frame. From there, it's basically your imagination runs free. You have a tabulated data that you can do anything with. Synthetic fields are a construct that allows you to define additional transformation on your entities pre-querying. And again, why this is cool is kind of, if you're familiar with SQL, it's kind of analogous to SQL views. So you can create really advanced transformations on the fly for your query on the graph. Really, really cool stuff that we'll show to you later today. And of course, the visualizations. It's as easy as instantiating Subgrounds, pulling a query of interest, and immediately throwing that into a visualization, as can be seen here. So it streamlines your workflow, making life much easier for you as a data scientist or an analyst trying to get some on-chain data. So that's I flew by the presentation really quickly because I wanted to focus on the live demonstration instead. And I'm going to pass off the microphone to Stouffer, who is our lead engineer and one of the inventors of Subgrounds as well. And he'll be giving you demonstration today. Stouffer?
Hey, I'm actually going to chime in really quickly, just so I'm not interrupting Stouffer's flow. We are trying something new for POAP distribution, and so we wanted to take like a couple-minute break just to let people go and claim their POAPs. And so rather than getting started and running for 2 minutes and then having to interrupt, might be a good time to take a quick coffee break, since that'll go live at 1:30. And then we can spend the rest of our time with an uninterrupted demo, if that's all right.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Gabriel, take it away.
Yes. Hi, this is Gabriel. So for the POAPs, instead of having me have to manually send them to everybody, we're trying a different distribution method. So POAP has a website that you all can go to and just go to the site. You'll be able to claim the POAP. It'll only be open for a brief time, like probably about 15 minutes. So you should do it now-ish if you want to grab one, because they won't be available after the call. So if you go to the announcements channel, the most recent announcement by me, there's a link to a POAP website. You're going to go there, and there's going to be a little entry box, and they're going to ask you for the name of the like special web address. And so let me pull that up for you. And so you can just go in, and it is now 30 on the dot, so it should be up. So you can just enter into that box, Metrics Playground. That's all one word, no spaces, no caps, just Metrics Playground. You can go enter that word right into that entry field, and you should be able to send them either an email address or your ETH address, and you can mint a POAP. So I figure I'll give everybody just a minute or two to go there and give it a shot.
Awesome. That worked well for me.
Yes, if anybody is having any issues with it, they can DM me directly, and they should do so in the next 15 minutes so I can get that sorted out and we can get you your POAP.
Awesome, and we'll give everybody another minute or so to refill on coffee or whatever, and then Stouffer, you'll be able to take it away and take us home.
Yep. Again, that is Metrics Playground. One word, no spaces, no caps, just put it right into the entry field, and you should get your POAP. And again, the website address to enter that into is in the announcements channel.
All right, cool. So you can continue to do this in the next 13 minutes, but Stouffer, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you Tachi for the introduction, and thank you MetricsDAO for hosting us today. I'll quickly share my screen to get started. All right. So, oh, and by the way, if you hear some background noise, I'm sorry about that. Some people are doing construction work next to my apartment. Nothing I can do about it. All right, so using Subgrounds. The first thing that you would usually do when you start a Subgrounds project is import the Subgrounds class and initialize a Subgrounds object, which is by calling the constructor. And this object holds like a bunch of state variables that's useful throughout the querying process. Once you have the Subgrounds object, you can then call the load subgraph method, which takes as an argument a URL that points to a GraphQL API. Quick note, like Subgrounds was designed...
Is audio?
Sorry?
is that just me?
No, Stouffer sounds good. You're good, Stouffer.
All right, cool, thanks. Well, there might be background noise because there's construction work. Yeah. In any case, this URL can point to any GraphQL API. Subgrounds doesn't just work with the graph, but it was designed with the graph in mind. And in this demo in particular, we'll be using the Olympus protocol metrics subgraph, which you can find on the hosted service page if you search for Olympus protocol metrics. Keep in mind there are many other subgraphs that you could potentially query using Subgrounds. This is just like one example. And if you want to get the URL of a subgraph to actually do some queries, it's right there. So once we've loaded the subgraph, the next thing I'll show you is how to start creating Subgrounds requests. So one of the fields that is present in the protocol metrics subgraph is the current APY that is being rewarded, that is being offered by Olympus for staking. So what we can do is we can try to query that current APY by creating what's called a field path. And a field path is basically a selection path through the GraphQL schema indicating which field you want to get, starting from the root of the query, like the query object, all the way down to a leaf. So in that case, we would be querying the protocol metrics entities and then querying the current APY. And in this case here, current APY is a field path. Now what this field path looks like when we convert it to raw GraphQL, really quickly. It looks like a standard GraphQL query string. Now, obviously, usually you want to get more than just one field out of one entity, so you can basically mesh different field paths when you create requests. So I'll show you how to do that. So in this case, protocol metrics is a partial field path. We're querying protocol metrics here, but we're not actually querying any fields because we'll reuse that variable when we create our request. So we want to get the current APY and also maybe the market cap. And I'll print it out quickly just to show you again what the underlying query is when you created the request like this. So you can see that the two fields we're interested in show up in the GraphQL equivalent. You can also use field paths to set arguments for your queries. So let's say we want to pass arguments to the protocol metrics query field. We can specify them all in pure Python. So we want to get the first 10 protocol metric entities, and we'll be reusing this little code here. You can see that the arguments we supplied in Python appear as expected in the actual GraphQL query. And just for fun, we can look at what these query would look like when we execute them in the GraphQL console here. We get like the current APY and market cap for the latest 10 protocol metric entities. So this is how you construct requests in Subgrounds. Now let's get down to actually querying some data. So there are two main functions that you would use in Subgrounds to query data. The first one is the query method on the subgraph object. So we're reusing the, yeah, okay, so we'll start making a new field path. So latest protocol metric. We'll reuse these arguments here, but we'll select just one because we want the latest one. And then we can use the subgraph.query method to query some values. So in this case, let's just get the current PY. Once you run this, you get, 939%, which is the current APY of Olympus DAO. You can, if you query multiple values, multiple fields, you will get as a return value a tuple containing both fields. And if you have a query that returns multiple entities, such as this query here, we're getting the latest 10 entities. When you query it using the subgraph.query method, it will return each field as a list, right? So in this case, we get a tuple of lists. The first list in the tuple is the current APY for the latest 10 protocol metric entities, and these values here are the market cap for those same entities. Now, having data in this format is not the most useful thing to have, so we also have the query df, or query data frame function, which works essentially the same way, except that the return data is automatically formatted in a data frame. So in this case, the data here is the same, but it's much more familiar to anyone who has used pandas or Python for data science. So that is like the basic functionality of Subgrounds. Now let's move on to something more interesting, synthetic fields. So as Tachi has said, synthetic fields are kind of analogous to SQL views in the sense that you can define transformations based on the schema of the subgraph pre-querying instead of querying the raw data and then doing all the transformation post-querying. So an example of how you would define a synthetic field, you basically use the Python assignment operation on the entity you want to augment with a synthetic field. And in this case, we'll add a synthetic field to protocol metric. And the synthetic field will be the ratio of the Olympus market cap and the TVL of Olympus, right? So that would give you an idea of how large the market cap of Olympus is relative to its TVL. So let's call it TVL market cap ratio. And we'll use the market cap field divided by the total value blocked. And we'll multiply it by 100 so we can get the percentage. And once you've defined this synthetic field on the protocol metric entity, then you can query it just like any other field. So let's go back to our previous query. We can now add the TVL market cap ratio as a query field, and ta-da, you get it in the data frame as if it were a regular field on the subgraph. And what's cool about this is you can use regular Python arithmetic operations to define your synthetic fields. If the transformation you're doing, is an arithmetic transformation. But in the case where it wouldn't be the case, just import a few other things here. You can also use the synthetic field constructor, which is more verbose, but also more flexible. So what we'll do here to showcase this functionality is, well, first of all, let me just add a little extra field here, the timestamp field. The timestamp field on the subgraph is just like a Unix timestamp, which is not very human readable. So maybe we want to do something about it. So what we can do is we can create a new synthetic field on the protocol metric entity. We'll call it datetime. And what this synthetic field will do is essentially format the timestamp into something more human readable. So when you create a synthetic field using the constructor, the first argument is a function, which is the function that will be applied to the underlying raw field. So in this case, our function will simply format the timestamp into a nice string. You need to supply the type of the synthetic field if you use the constructor. And then the third argument would be the quote-unquote argument of the synthetic field. So in this case, it would be the timestamp. So now that we have a new datetime field defined on protocol metric, we can create a datetime instead of the timestamp. And that gives you a nice, ISO datetime that's much more readable. Synthetic fields can also take multiple arguments. So for instance, if we wanted to redo the first synthetic field we talked about, which takes two other fields as argument using the constructor, how we would do it is, so essentially here we'd have a function that takes two arguments. We have our formula here. And for the argument section of the synthetic field, we would put the two fields that are the arguments to that function. So in this case, total value logged and market cap. And we'll call it TVL ratio 2. Sorry. Just making sure it's the same. Oh, it's market cap divided by TVL. Oh, yeah. Huh. Yeah, so I left the type here as a string, and it seems that it converted it to a nice string on its own, which is always useful, but maybe we want it as a float. Oh, that might be actually an old synthetic field that I did. Oh, okay, yeah, there you go. Yes. There you go. All right. So that's essentially what you can do with synthetic fields, and synthetic fields can also be used as other arguments to more complex synthetic fields. So it creates you can have a nice hierarchy of transformations that is very composable and also very exportable in between data science projects. So now we'll move on to the visualization functionality offered by Subgrounds. And as Tachi mentioned, we have wrappers for Plotly graphical objects in a submodule called Polywrappers. And what these allow you to do is essentially you will be able to use field paths wherever you would usually use data when you create Plotly objects. So here, let me just create a new field path. This will be all the protocol metrics of the past year. Select the first 365 because there's only one protocol metric entity per day. So if we get the last 365, that should get us the data for the past year. And here we'll actually create our figure. To create a Subgrounds figure, you need to pass in, you need to give it the Subgrounds object that we initialized at the beginning of the demo as an argument. And then trace objects, which are basically simple wrappers around Plotly trace objects. So if anyone here is familiar with Plotly, you'll certainly recognize some of these arguments and classes. If you're not familiar with Plotly, you will still be able to enjoy the nice visualizations we'll create. But all right, so in this case, we'll be plotting we'll be plotting against the date time, which we defined earlier. And we'll select, say, the market cap of Ohm. And we'll plot the figure here like this. And voila, you get a nice little chart here that showcases the market cap of Ohm over time for the past year. And notice that, there's very little actual data work that you need to do. You can just plug in the field paths directly into the graphical objects. If we look at a more complicated example, I'll just copy it because it's a pretty long code block. Here, so quick overview of what we're doing here. We are creating another datetime synthetic field, but instead of creating it on the protocol metric entity, we're creating it on the daily staking reward entity. Just to make it more human readable as well. We're importing the bar trace from our wrapper collection. And we previously created a query to get all the protocol metrics from the past year. This time we'll also query all the daily staking rewards from the past year. And what we'll plot is a combined plot that contains both the historical Ohm price and as a line plot, and the daily staking reward amount as a bar chart, all in the same figure. If you're wondering, the arguments here like name, axis, and even all of this, the layout, these are all Plotly arguments. What Subgrounds graphical objects do is, any argument that's also an argument to the underlying Plotly object will be forwarded to that underlying object, and every argument that's a field path will be handled by the Subground wrapper. So you can really customize Subgrounds graphical components just like you would Plotly graphical components. And if we run this and display the figure, what we get is a combined plot of, in blue is the historical Ohm price in US dollars, and in orange is the daily staking rewards in staked Ohm. So that was a quick overview of what Subgrounds can do. I'll also quickly show you an example of a dashboard we previously created. All these charts utilize Subgrounds on the back end, and we had the idea of recreating, to the extent possible, the Dune dashboard for Olympus DAO using Subgrounds in the graph. And you can see that we got pretty close for some of these visualizations. So that's about all I had to show. I'll end with a series of little caveats. First of all, what you can do with Subgrounds really depends on the kind of data that's available in the subgraph you're querying. Subgrounds can't just materialize data out of thin air. So, if you want to fully utilize Subgrounds, then you better have like a pretty good subgraph to connect to. I'll also say that Subgrounds is very early in its development stage, so we have quite a big test suite, but I'm sure we missed a few bugs. So if you try to use it and find a bug, or you have an idea for new features, feel free to reach out to me, Tachi, or Siri. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me. And who should I pass on the torch to?
I think to me, because we're almost out of time, but that was perfectly timed. This is really cool, and it's going to be super useful for our analysts who might tackle future Olympus challenges. We've already run a round of Olympus bounties, and we're likely to, in the future, without giving away too much, go back to Olympus and do some more there. So this will be a really powerful arrow in the quiver for analysts to get into the data, visualize it, and present it. Let me ask, just for the benefit of our audience and also for following up, if people want to get more involved or if they want to, hammer on the tool, what would be most helpful to Playgrounds at this point?
That's a very good question. Honestly, it's just jumping into the repo and getting started with Subgrounds. Download it in your local machine and play around with any data. It's not just limited to Olympus. You can use it as long as there's a graph API available for any protocol. You can use Subgrounds. It works for any available API on the graph network across 24 networks as well. So feel free to download it. Help us break the code. I'm hoping we can see a lot of PRs and modifications, suggestions as you go. And stop by our Playgrounds Discord. We're always looking for developers to help us build dashboards, analytics tools. The journey has just begun. So please use the tool and help us grow.
Yeah, and if you want to drop some links in either general or active projects to the Discord and to the repo, that would be great.
Awesome. We'll definitely do that. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, and thank you for stepping up and giving such an engaging, comprehensive demo. Before we run out of time, I wanted to briefly highlight, in addition to Convex and Harmony, we have a Uniswap program coming. So we're going to be running all our 6 analytical experiments for that. And we continue to write up our experiments and share with the world what we've learned, how we're iterating, and the tooling that we're building out to support that. So if you have ideas for content pieces, reach out to me or Rochelle in our marketing and communications pod, our Marcom pod. And as always, if you want to get involved, check out the FAQ section, which is now live, or the DAO roles to see the roles that we have available. We are continuing to scale, looking for people to jump in and help, and continue to support as more and more programs and more protocols get off the ground. So reach out at any time. Once again, a big thank you to Playgrounds for the demo and for building something awesome. And we will see everybody in 2 weeks for our next community call. So stay tuned for announcements on that. And then if you're looking to do some Teradata, even at a beginner level, drop by the education workshop tomorrow. I think that's everything. Any questions before we wrap up?
Just something to add about POAPs. So, like we said, we're testing out some different ways for distribution. If, you were on the call and something went wrong and you had an issue getting your POAP, please reach out to me, Gabriel. You can DM me. I have a list of everybody who was in attendance, and I'm happy to make sure that everybody who, honestly shows up for our events gets their POAP. So I'm happy to help you.
Awesome. And as always, thank you all for joining and for helping make MetricsDAO awesome. We will see you all next time.
Thanks, y'all. See ya.